My name is Mara Fleischman. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am the co-founder and CEO of the Chef Ann Foundation, and I am thrilled to be moderating today's really, really important conversation on transforming school kitchens. Today, we are getting technical. Everyone is excited about the push for more fresh, scratch-made food in schools, but we are dealing with the realities of making this happen. There really are a number of barriers that we've seen at the Chef Ann Foundation over the course of the last 17 years, but the one we're focusing on today I feel is really the most significant. We're talking about the equipment and infrastructure needed to make fresh food in schools a reality in our district kitchens and in throughout the United States. And really, the timing for this conversation could not be more in line because this week the USDA and HHS announced their new Harvest to Hallways initiative, which included an additional 50 million on top of the 20 million they had already allocated for kitchen infrastructure and funding, which is some of the largest amounts of funding for kitchen infrastructure that we've seen in the past decades. So, for those of you who don't know about the Chef Ann Foundation, the Chef Ann Foundation is a national nonprofit that works with schools to help them serve more fresh food and less processed food. I was able to co-found the organization with Chef Ann herself, who is on this panel and will introduce herself at the point when I ask the panelists to introduce themselves. And we are also joined today with other experts who have built school food kitchens, have helped districts build and fiscally model school kitchens, advocate for kitchens and infrastructure funding in states and federally, and who really understand the policy that we're at. So I looked at the list of people that registered for this webinar, and we have a lot of school food operators today, which I'm so excited about. So if you're a school food professional and you have faced some of these issues that we're about to talk about, please drop a note in the chat. It will help everyone kind of understand in real time because we have representation from across this country. What are some of the issues you all are facing? And please feel free to chat as we go. So before we dive in, this is part two of a three-part series, Healthy School Food for Thought. And in October, we will have the third part, which is called The Secret Ingredient, and it's called Building the School Food Workforce. And we're really going to be talking about workforce development. We have great panelists for that one too. So if you haven't registered, please do. We are recording today, and we will send you a recording if you have registered for this webinar, along with resources we collect during this webinar. So people are going to put links in the chat for resources. Our panelists are going to put links out. We are going to collect it all. Ashley on our team is going to work to create a document of resources for you, and you'll get that with the recording. The chat, please engage everyone. The chat's open. Share where you're joining from or what brings you here today. Our team is in the chat right now to connect, so they will also look for updates from them. There is a Q&A button if you haven't seen it at the bottom. Use this feature for questions that you have for the panelists, and we've reserved time at the end to answer some of your questions. Okay, it's time to get started. Okay, so I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves. For our speakers, please tell us your name, your role, and share one moment from your career that captures what schools are up against when it comes to kitchen and infrastructure issues. And we are going to start with Anne from Center for Eco-Literacy.
Thanks, Mara. Good morning, everyone. Like Mara said, my name is Ann Mortel. I'm calling in today from Berkeley, California. I'm with the Center for Eco-Literacy. And what I wanted to share was in my previous work with the San Francisco Unified School District, the district has a wide range of kitchen facilities and meal service models. So in my work there, I was supporting lunch service at an elementary school that relied on a heat and serve model. Packaged meals were warmed in an oven, and lunch was served from a pop up table just in the corner of the gymnasium. So when lunch was over, the table came down, the oven was wheeled away, and the gym was a gym again. This kind of setup is so common at schools across the country, and it may be how your school nutrition program is operating today. It works. But I think we can imagine something better for our kids and for our school nutrition professionals, that real kitchens designed to prepare and serve more fresh local food will work even better.
Thank you, Anne. That is such a great example, and we have seen that everywhere. And sometimes I think, unfortunately, that speaks to the undervaluing of mealtime. But we'll get into that. Okay, next we have Tarek. Tarek, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mara. I am Tariq Sharif. I am in Washington, D.C. I work in the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. We love our acronyms here in DC. And prior to that, well, I say I'm recovering chef now, but worked at DC Central Kitchen, operating the school meals program, one of the school meals program contracts there, and shelter meals and a couple of components. And have also worked in fine dining across space and consulting all over the food system. And I have the added bonus of being a board member of the Chef Ann Foundation, and they taking expertise to the levels here that we're talking about today. Um, I think, oh man, I'm gonna take it back to being a kid and eating school lunch. I remember similar, right? Like the gymnasium in elementary school became was also the cafeteria double duty. They had those like off to the side. I remember when school, I'm aging myself here, what school lunch was a dollar. It went from a dollar to a dollar 25, and I thought that was such a crazy jump in cost. And then we get our Mickey Mouse ice cream bars for 50 cents extra, which was amazing. Um, but just going through that line, the amount of people going through that space, how you come out, where the food goes, and looking at all those operations and then working in the back of house and doing that work and understanding what it actually takes to feed a few hundred students in a school versus the 6,000 plus meals we did daily at decentralization and managed oversaw for multiple schools. It is tough. And so having dedicated space, equipment, and understanding how that pertains to the menu, and how you're going to use those tools and the skills you need to use those tools are all really important. Scratch cooking is being a chef like anyone else in any other restaurant. And I think that's one of the most undervalued tools and education components for the chefs in the kitchen, um, is making sure we're supporting them.
I love that, Tarek. It's so true. And a great little hint to our October webinar. Thank you so much. Well, often this person doesn't need an introduction, but Chef Anne, will you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to. Hi, I'm Ann Cooper. I am co-founder and president of the board of the Chef Ann Foundation. Happy to be here with all of you. And I've been in school food for about 25 years. And when I went from a private school to a public school, I went to Berkeley. And Alice Waters kind of drugged me there, and I got there. And when I when I got there, I was expecting food would be pretty good because Alice was involved. Well, I was wrong. It was all prepackaged. Everything was served out of plastic. So we had a pretty good sized freezer, almost no walk-in space. We had a little central kitchen, and there was a can crusher bigger than me in the middle of the kitchen because all anybody did was open cans. They did a box cutters, of course, because you had to open the boxes of chicken nuggets. So that's where it started. And, many of you may be in the same place where you don't have walk-ins or tilt skillets or things like that. But I started with box cutters and can crushers. And you can definitely make stuff happen as you change and move along with equipment and slowly but surely make change.
I love that story, Anne. Thank you so much. Definitely pay attention to the chat. We have amazing panelists, but you guys, we also have, I see so many recognizable names in the chat, school food operators that we work with across the country that are gonna provide pieces of content and feedback that are gonna also shed light on this. So definitely pay attention to the chat. And certainly last but not least, Liz, will you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for inviting me to speak on this webinar. My name is Liz Campbell. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs and Media Relations for the School Nutrition Association. I'm also a registered dietitian, and when I was asked to prepare my introduction and pinpoint a time that I had an understanding of where we were headed or what challenges we had to face with school kitchen equipment, was when I was working as the Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And at the time, our president was Donna Martin, who was a school nutrition director extraordinaire. And we received funding to document across the country the state of school meals and school kitchen equipment. And so Donna and I hit the road and had a crew filming across the country. And I will never forget walking into a school in Pennsylvania. We walked into the gymnasium, which was also the cafeteria, which was also where they had PTO meetings and you name it. And in the corner, there was this tiny little room, and we turned the corner, and there were 6 school nutrition professionals bent over a pop-up table, chopping lettuce and working magic in this tiny little corner. And I thought, gosh, what if we gave these folks the resources and invested in them? Imagine what additional magic that they could actually create, given what they were pulling off over in the corner. So fast forward to today, I just feel incredibly lucky to be able to be representing 50,000 members who are working every single day in the school nutrition community and really working as hard as we can on Capitol Hill to try to get the investments that school nutrition professionals deserve. So thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you, Liz. I mean, I want to say I've worked with Liz for like at least a decade. I feel like we've been in the same world. And I'm so excited that Liz is in her role because the way she thinks about the priorities of schools and food and how to get there is very progressive. And I'm just excited about this kind of next chapter and organizations coming together. So love that we have the opportunity to have Liz on this call. Okay, excellent. Well, we're going to start with Chef Ann herself. So let's start. You personally built kitchens, as you kind of you alluded to a little bit in Berkeley, but you personally built kitchens as a food service director, most significantly in Boulder Valley. And you also assess kitchens. So you've done this through the Chef Ann Foundation. You help us go in and assess kitchens, what they need, how they can marry up to menus. What's the most common barrier you see, and where do you advise districts with limited resources to start with their kitchens?
So everyone's going to say the common barrier is money, but it's just not that simple. So we say there's 5 pillars to school food: food, finance, facilities, human resources, and marketing. So let's start with food. Do you know what your menu is going to be for the equipment you want? Do you know where you're going, not where you are today, but where you want to go with your menu? Facilities. And I see this all the time. Somebody buys equipment, but then the electricity there's not enough electricity. They don't have the gas. They don't have the water. So then equipment, just doesn't get used. And you can't decide what equipment you need till you have a menu. So it's the food, finance, and you need to know where your money is. It's not always just about money. As we've heard, there's money available out there depending on where you are. But just because somebody gives you a grant for $100,000 or more, or $50,000, you have to have a menu to be able to decide what equipment you buy. And you can't buy any equipment until you figure out what the utilities are. We've gone into kitchens where they've got everything else, and then somebody says, oh, do you know there's asbestos in the wall? And all of a sudden the project's like 3 years down the road, right? And then there's this training piece. So the human resources, you buy fancy new equipment and then no one will use it because they don't know how. I've gone into kitchens where we've got these beautiful food processors that are covered, sitting in the corner somewhere. And I go, like, what is going on? Well, they decided not to use it because it's too hard to clean it. Well, did anyone really ever go through to really see what that was going to be like and train people and bring people in that work for equipment companies and make sure that the staff is trained? So it's not just one thing, it's all of these things. And but really understanding how much money you have, how much money you need, really truly understanding your menu and where you want to go with it. Maybe today you're doing a lot of pre-made food. Maybe it's heat and serve food. Maybe you're not even on foundational speed scratch yet. But that's not where you want to be. So you don't want to buy hot boxes today, but what you really might want is combi ovens. Or you don't want to buy a small food processor if what you're going to need is a big one. Or you're not going to want to buy a blender to make smoothies for breakfast if what you're really going to need is a big bar mixer. So it's all of those things. And as I'm reading the chat, it's really apparent that a lot of people feel like it's money. And of course, the finances are really important. But if you understand what your fund, where your fund is right now, your fund balance, maybe you can get grants for equipment. Maybe you're in a school district that's going to do some bonds. And so maybe you can get into the bonds. But besides the money, make sure you know your menus, make sure you know where they're going to go, and make sure the equipment matches where you're going to be, and the facilities team can really do what you want. So there's my more than 2 cents.
I love your 2 cents, Anne. I feel super lucky because I have actually been able to sit down with Anne. She had this master spreadsheet that she created when she was building out the Boulder Valley Central Kitchen. It was like, it was a thing of beauty if you are a strategist and you really want to understand the connection to menus and equipment and how you're getting to there and the connection from equipment to meals per labor hour and the whole puzzle. It was a beautiful thing. It takes a lot of thinking. It is way beyond just the utility of a piece of equipment and really the connection to the greater strategy of your school food program. So thanks, Anne. Okay, Liz, let's go to you. Let's zoom out to the national picture. As VP of Government Affairs for School Nutrition Association, you're in DC talking to policymakers on these kind of exact issues. You were also at Legislative Action Conference, which is SNA's big policy conference, where kitchen infrastructure and funding was really front and center. Do you think some of that work led to the Harvest to Hallways and kitchen infrastructure funding that we just saw come out? And two, where do things stand today on federal funding? And are there champions in Congress that we should be watching?
Yes, those are great questions. And I do think the conversations that are happening at the Legislative Action Conference and on Capitol Hill, but also in the media, are really influencing the conversation around infrastructure. And I just want to share with folks the way that SNA chooses their priorities. We are actually putting out surveys to our members, right? So we're about to send out our survey for this year as well. And they tell us what the most important items are that they want us to be advocating and creating our position paper. And last year, the reason LAC focused so much on infrastructure and equipment was because the survey that we heard back from our members was that it was a critical piece of support that they needed. And to Chef Ann's point, an investment financially, but also in training and learning how best to utilize equipment was something that our members had indicated to us was really important. So one, it's member driven. Two, this is our moment. School nutrition is a popular topic. It is everywhere. And so we've been able to share all of these stories with the media. I think if folks haven't seen it, and maybe I can share this with Ashley to share in the chat when I'm done talking, Bloomberg did an incredible article on the infrastructure and the investments it would take to meet some of the requests coming from this administration's priorities. And then third, I wanted to just share in Congress, we actually were at these conferences are talking to folks from USDA and HHS. So at LAC, at SNIC, at ANC, right? We're having listening sessions with administration officials, and they really did hear and understand that infrastructure is a big piece of moving towards their administration priorities. So when we then go to the Hill and have these conversations, there's good news and bad news. The good news is people are interested and they're asking questions about it. The bad news is in the current appropriations process that we have identified where capital equipment grants are invested from the federal perspective, in the House, we've seen cuts to capital equipment grants, right? So it's the opposite direction of what we are hearing the administration priorities are leaning towards. We know it's what our members are asking for, but then we're not showing up for money. It is encouraging for the Harvest to Hallways announcement to talk about equipment, but we all know in reality there's a long way to go to have the actual investment that we need in order to see big changes, or to even just support where folks are right now in the continuum. So I think the people to watch in Congress, where we can continue to push, we have bipartisan champions. We have DeSaulnier from California and G.T. Thompson, who have been supporting the School Food Modernization Act for years. They recognize the importance of equipment. Can we push them more? Yes, I can always push people more. And then I think in the Senate, we do have a number of champions. Again, bipartisan. I think Senator Booker has been really loud. We and Senator Hoeven, who is, the chair of the subcommittee on ag approps, has heard us loud and clearly that the House investment in equipment is not sufficient. So I think we might have some wins in the Senate when we start to get to an end of year omnibus. So the good news is we're making progress. And the better news is there's lots of people who care about this. And so we're going to keep advocating to hopefully get us to where we need to be in the proper investment in infrastructure.
That is a whole lot of incredible information. I love you're right on. It's interesting to see how who's getting the chance to push funding forward in the federal government and who is not, and how the some of the power dynamics are working for sure. But I love it is totally true that this is a bipartisan issue. This is our moment. This is our moment, people. I think we can see it in the chat too. And that's why we're doing this webinar right now, because we do believe this is our moment to really grab onto the fact that, if we want to see fresh food in schools, we need some equipment to do that. Tarek, you are up next. So you have a really unique vantage point here. You started as a chef running DC Central Kitchens, producing over 6,000 scratch-made meals a day. Now you're in the business development and strategy in DC's deputy mayor's office. So you see the issue both as an operator and as someone shaping policy and funding decisions. So when you're talking to city planners or budget decision makers kind of outside of food service, what is the argument that actually lands for kitchen infrastructure investment, and where does that pitch fall flat?
Thanks. That's a great question. And I love what Anne and Liz have already talked about. And I think it starts small, right? So we're thinking about when talking to policymakers, budget makers, decision makers, there's generally two pots of funding we can pull from for renovations for funding, right? There's operations budgets, which go for increased costs of labor, staffing, purchasing, and there's capital budgets for those renovations and big purchases. Um, and so those two things, even within a city or a county or a state, are different pots of funding. And they can spread out very differently. They carry over year into the way budgets work. And so that's one thing to understand, without getting too much into the weeds on the intricacies of city budget policy. I think the important thing is understanding your menu is really important to start this place, so you know what to ask for and how to make that ask. When talking to policy leaders and budget decision makers, it's all about the return on investment, that ROI you're getting, and what those investments are going to get. So if you're saying, hey, we need more money so I can feed students better meals, okay, that's great. How much more money do you need? and what is it going towards, and what is it going to cost us in the long run, and how much are we going to get back for that investment? So when you break it down to that, if you're saying, I have, let's say in a smaller school district, or let's use DC example, we have, oh gosh, if I can remember the numbers correctly, it changes all the time, about 108, 111 public schools that we serve here. A bunch of those are self-operated from our own team internal to government. We have three different food service management vendors as well. And for all of that, we can break out the numbers per school, per student, per child, what it costs to feed them in our budget. And that's really important. So when you say it costs us $7 per child, all in to feed that child, versus the reimbursement we get, which means this is how much the city comes up with to spend or to feed each child. And now you take a portion of that and say, well, if we did purchase this equipment item and we did a little bit of math, we can find out it will only cost an additional 1 cent per child, right? Or to renovate 10 kitchens, it'll cost an additional 10 cents per child. That makes a big, big difference. Everyone wants to work and operate off of, yes, we want to feed students better meals. We want to get them better food. We want to have healthy scratch cook meals. We want to buy local products. That's all amazing. And what is it actually going to cost us, and how do we translate that and make that into an argument? And so that's one thing that really helps. And understanding largely if we're going to individually scratch meals in all the schools, that's a big investment in a bunch of schools to modernize and renovate and change things. And if you have a central processing facility of some sort, that can then reduce that cost and defray some of those costs. And with that central facility, you're not just talking about school meals, you're talking about commercial meals, you're talking about child adult care food program meals, you're talking about older adult and older Americans meals, you're talking about emergency feeding, you're talking about potentially commercial kitchen space during off hours for businesses to gain a foothold and find access. So there's other arguments you can make of these kind of plus one things you can add on to that cost, and defray some of those costs amongst a larger group of people, which is really helpful to understand and think about. And I think the other part of that is just landing again back with that. This is what we want to go for. We've said about in policy, we've talked about there's some additional funding from the federal government we can get, and going out and grabbing that funding, applying for that and getting it and saying, hey, we got half the pot. Now we need a little bit more from you. Then people are more likely to help and support because you're going to have a way to again defer and defray some of those higher costs by finding additional funding elsewhere, which is why this federal funding is so critical right now to support that work. And then the last thing I'll say is always hit home with the final argument, which is in some cases, a lot of students are getting all of their meals from school programs, breakfast in classroom or breakfast, lunch, aftercare. That may be the only meal. Those may be the only meals a child eats that entire day. And so it's important to remember that this investment in those meal programs and that cooking is going to make a huge difference in health outcomes and patterns and dietary changes for students, and for food security just across the board. So that I think it's always remember data is important, money is important, and make it a human picture as well.
So great, Tarek. Those are, I really do think we have to look at this issue from a number of perspectives. And the dollars and cents and how you talk about the dollars and cents and the investment and the return on that investment are going to be really important as we all try and progress this agenda forward. So I think uh, really good pieces of information there. Thank you. All right, next up we have Anne. I've been waiting for this. There's a lot of talk in the chat about this too, Anne. So your topic is something people want to know about. But California has one of the most comprehensive school food programs in the country. They have passed universal free meals. They have passed farm to school incubator grants. They have passed the workforce development program, Healthy School Food Pathway, and they have passed kitchen and infrastructure training grants. Can you tell us about these KIT funds and what impact it's had so far?
Yeah, thank you. So our experience here in California shows that, making school meals free for all students is just one part of transforming the school food picture. So if we want schools to serve more fresh and local meals, we also have to invest in kitchens and in school nutrition professionals. So when we were advocating with our partners for School Meals for All, we heard directly from school nutrition leaders that facilities would be a major barrier to serving more students under this program. We helped to convene the School Meals for All Coalition, which now includes over 200 organizations here. And we advocated not only for school meals for all, but for complementary investments in kitchen infrastructure, culinary training, farm to school, as Mara mentioned. So when California adopted school meals for all, we also invested 150 million in kitchen infrastructure and training. And to date, we've now invested 1.45 billion. We have 5.7 million public school students here. So that's about $50 per student each over the last 5 years. Like Mara said, we call it the KIT program for short. And the idea is give schools the equipment, the facilities, the training they need to freshly prepare school meals. And we know that the needs are vary by district and even by school site, right? So it could be a combi oven or a produce prep sink, cold storage, or refrigerated trucks to store and transfer fresh produce, which we have an abundance of here in California. There's no shortage. Districts have even invested using KIT dollars in food trucks, which offers like a trendier delivery method to increase student adoption, but also provides an additional point of service to ensure more students can participate in school lunch, especially at our high schools with long lines. So we have evidence that this KIT funding has really made a difference here in California. The School Meals for All Coalition surveyed 245 districts and charter schools serving 2.1 million students. And 90% reported that KIT had increased access to school meals or improved meal quality or both. And actually, the remaining 10% of schools were in the midst of kitchen construction projects during that survey. The KIT program has also been really critical to making School Meals for All work here in our state. So 78% of districts surveyed used KIT to respond to the increased participation they are seeing under School Meals for All. Our organization, along with our partners in the School Meals for All Coalition, has continued to advocate for more KIT funding in the state budget. Just last month, we successfully advocated and won an additional 500 million. And, California schools, we're planning to serve 1 billion school meals this school year. So I know there are a few of you in the chat that are contributing to that number. So this KIT funding is supporting more of those meals being freshly prepared with local ingredients, which is great.
Oof, so there you have it, guys, right? That is 1.5 billion invested into kitchen infrastructure and funding in the state of California. Yes, we still have to celebrate progress federally, but that is, we are excited that 70 million is allocated for kitchen infrastructure and funding across the country in Harvest to Hallways. But we do, I think, as a group, as an advocacy group, we know there's more to be done. Um, and this is like, uh, I'm so grateful for the Center for Eco-Literacy for kind of moving forward and trying to get some baseline information about how this money has been spent, what the impact has been on school meals in California. But one thing I was talking to Liz about when we were preparing for this panel is, as states, as we in groups start to advocate in states for more kitchen infrastructure and funding dollars from the states, we really need to advocate for some baseline research to accompany that funding so that we can all truly understand what the impact of this kitchen equipment is. Kind of back to Tarek, right? Back to what he was saying. How can we then talk about the ROI? What did that combi oven do? I was just emailing back and forth with RJ, who's in the chat, about this yesterday. Like what are the pieces of equipment? What is the return on investment? How does it move it forward? How much more local procurement can happen because you're changing your menus, and that's reinvestment into your community. So I'm definitely excited that this is starting to blossom and grow, and I think we have more to come. All right, let's go to Liz. Liz, after hearing what's been happening in California, can you speak to how folks in other states might take what's been done there and use that to advocate for similar funding? Obviously, not similar in 1.5 billion. That's going to be hard to do in other states, but similar. And could a state level SNA be a partner in that effort to advocate?
Yeah, I love that you chose this question because I think it's an important point to make. So what's happening at the federal level is we have not been making a lot of progress in moving the needle on school nutrition investments. So what we've seen is there's a lot of work happening at the state level. And because of that, because things are moving so much more quickly at the state level, SNA has invested in a state level policy analyst. So we have a fabulous coworker of mine, Emily Cranius, has joined our team. She's also a dietitian, also worked at USDA previously. She is working with all of our SNA state public policy and legislative chairs, right? So within each state, there's our state SNA affiliate, and then they have a legislative chair who's working on hearing from members within that state and thinking about what policy priorities those members have in that state. And Emily's going to help them create policy agenda plans this year so that folks are preparing now for when the legislative session starts, which is almost always in January. Some states are a little different. So I think now is the time, if there are folks on the call who are interested in hearing what the priorities are going to be in a particular state from the state SNA perspective, reaching out to my colleague Emily, and again, I'll put her contact information in the chat, will give you an opportunity to reach out to Emily and we can share which states are going to be focusing on asking for money for infrastructure. As you can imagine, there's lots of different priorities. There, folks are focused on healthy school meals for all and really inspired by the success of the 9 states that have it. There are folks who are working on removing the reduced price meal uh, cost as well. So there's different priorities, but the investment in infrastructure is really important to our members. So I think reaching out to Emily will really help us connect folks on this call who are interested in the states where this is going to be something that folks are working on, and then we can continue to work to elevate, because the more voices on an issue, the more influential we're going to be.
Thank you, Liz. That's great. I am so excited that that's kind of the direction that SNA is going to kind of help the states do that. And I'm really excited to see how that progresses as well. And kind of going, so we kind of zoom in and zoom out on this webinar. And so I want to get back to Anne and Chef Anne, that is. And I want to just ask Anne, so what are some examples of pieces of equipment that you can point to that have truly changed menus? Like, what are some of those big ROI pieces of equipment that you think can help with transformation?
Well, the first one, I think, which I also say is a gateway to healthy school food, is salad bars. I mean, no matter where you are in the continuum, but especially if you're just beginning and you have a lot of prepared foods or heat and serve foods, if you can put a salad bar in and give kids choice, fresh fruits and vegetables on the salad bar, including protein, animal, and vegetable, they can make a complete meal. That changes everything. But that's just the start, because a lot of people say we don't have the time and the staffing and the payroll, the meals per labor hour. So then I would say you buy a food processor appropriate to prepping the food for the salad bar and also for any menu items that you might think are going to come down the pike in the next couple of years. And then we talk about salad dressings. And I mentioned this earlier, the idea that people are going to buy blenders. Well, you don't want a blender. You want to be able to make salad dressings in 5-gallon buckets or 20-gallon Lexans. So what do you need? Big bar mixers. And none of those things cost that much. A salad bar is under $4,000. A food processor about $1,000, or maybe $2,000 if it's big. and a handheld big mixer under 1,000. So those aren't big investments, and they can really start you on the road to getting your students to really want more fresh fruits and vegetables and more healthy food. If you move to the hot kitchen, I would say the most versatile piece of equipment that can help you move to more scratch cooking is a tilt skillet, and one that's sized appropriately, that is built over a drain so you don't have buckets on the floors with waters pouring out, where you can empty it by tilting it with electricity and not going like this all day long. So, but in a tilt skillet, you can saute, you can fry, and I don't mean deep fry, I mean just fry an item. You can make grilled cheese sandwiches, hamburgers. You can fill it with water and cook pasta or rice. So it's a super versatile piece of equipment. Depending on the size, they may cost a little, and they certainly need water, sometimes gas or electricity. So, and a drain, absolutely a drain. But I think that's one of the most versatile pieces, and one that I often tell people, if you want to scratch cook, start with that.
This stuff never gets old for me. I could listen to Ann talk about kitchen equipment. I swear I am not blowing smoke here. It just I love the whole kind of like, interconnected piece to the equipment and the menu and all the things you can do. I think it's really interesting. I think it's really great to go like big picture policy and then go right down to the tilt skillet and what can that do? Um, Okay, great. So, Anne, now that kitchen infrastructure and training has a few years on of track record behind it, what do you think you've learned at the Center for Eco Literacy about what actually makes this kind of funding work well on the ground? And if you were advising an advocate in another state trying to build something similar, what would you tell them to prioritize, or what would you tell them to avoid?
Yeah, thank you. There's so many school nutrition professionals on this call too that I feel like could better answer this question, but I'll do my best. So I would say, as an advocate, first, center your work on school nutrition professionals. So our policy program at the Center for Eco Literacy is informed by school nutrition leaders. We have a California Food for California Kids network. It's over 175 school districts that reach over 2.5 million students. So these folks know the barriers to serving more fresh and local school food. So we do surveys, we, hang out with them as much as we can to get all the input and insight towards this program. So in the first year of KIT funding, like I mentioned, when California adopted school meals for all, there was originally a prescribed split between infrastructure and training costs. So we quickly learned this was not a successful model. The barriers, like I said, they differ by district. So sometimes a school needs a major kitchen renovation, but sometimes what stands in the way of students receiving more real food is just a sink to wash fresh produce, right? So I would encourage other states to create a flexible funding model that allows districts to meet goals for their individual school nutrition programs rather than prescribing one model from the state level. And, second, if you're investing in infrastructure, you need to invest in people, right? I think that's the next webinar you have coming up. It's all about the workforce. So a new oven, as Anne said, does not transform a meal program if the staff have not been trained to use it. So our approach recognizes equipment, facilities, workforce, menu change. They're all interconnected. I recall, in 2023, I was at a KIT-funded culinary training. I met a kitchen leader who had been with her district for over 10 years. And I said, so what did you guys do last year for your culinary training? And she said, this is my first culinary training ever. And, that really stuck with me. And I know it's so common, right, that our school nutrition workforce does not often get culinary training. And so I was so thrilled for her and her team to be able to get back to their kitchen with a whole new set of skills and like a new outlook for what's possible, not only for the meals they're preparing, but for their careers in school food. And investing in real kitchens is benefiting both our kids and our school nutrition professionals in the end.
Thank you, Anne. I appreciate it, and I love the call out to professional development and workforce development. And I see so many people in the chat, including Stella Nadura in the chat, really talking about workforce development and training, and it truly is key. A tilt skillet itself is not going to cook a meal without the person behind it. So we always have to remember that. And I think just to add on and reiterate what I said, the other piece I would really advocate for, if you're advocating for this in your state, is to have some baseline research to accompany that piece of legislation. Okay, Tarek, next. So you have made the case at the city level in DC, but a lot of our audience is working in small towns or suburban districts without that kind of same infrastructure. What advice would you give someone trying to build this argument for a school board or a county government instead of a city planning office?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's same but different. And something you mentioned, Mara, was really important, which is the economic component of this and local spend, right? Local spend means dollars stay in your local economy, which means more tax revenue locally. It means more jobs created. And that's really important. So understand again, I'm going to say it again, return investment, ROI is really important. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be complicated. And so an example could be something as simple as if you're buying local apples, quantify the amount of money you spend every year on local apples and claim that amount as the investment you put into your community. That's it. So we spent, and I think one statistics here is a recent farm to school census showed that 7.5% of funds are spent on local foods. With the Van Foundation, the work they do with a number of jurisdictions, they can get that number up to 40% in scratch cook numbers. So think of that on $1 million basis. You're going from 7.5%, which is $75,000. If you can get to 40%, that's $400,000 in local spend. That additional revenue could pay for the equipment you need to update your kitchen, and and you have to make sure your legislators know you're the one who brought that additional revenue in, and they should spend it back on you, right? That was something they never captured, they never expected to get. You're the one doing that work and creating that revenue. You should be the beneficiary of that. So if you're not telling your story and advocating and talking to your school board members, you're not talking to your chancellor, your superintendent, you're not talking to your local legislators, you're not testifying, mostly for parents. Government officials can't always testify. But parents, students, make sure you're going. Testifying can be scary, but it's as simple as, hey, this is important to me. This is why I want to do it. This is what I think you should do. And the more voices you get to say those same words over and over again, the more people will listen to you and pay attention and adjust the budgets because they know it's an important need. One thing I think we forget about is that the number one job of any elected official, generally speaking, is to get reelected. So I think that's important to know that if supporting you and the needs that you want as an advocate are going to get them reelected, that's what they're going to do. Outside of that, because I know we're running short on time, we have Q&A coming up. But understand again that healthy lens of central facility in a local area can support all the different food programs a city or jurisdiction operates, not just school food. So make sure you're bringing together other folks in that space, understanding what that investment looks like, and understanding that there's a health and behavioral lens here we're not talking about as well. Healthy school meals, rational school meals, really reduce the health burden disparity on individuals. And if you can quantify that and look at it over time, you're creating a healthy pattern for people that's going to be really meaningful as they grow up. And you're going to reduce healthcare costs and healthcare burdens in that same jurisdiction as well. So that's really important to think about. And the last thing I'll say is cold and dry storage, which I think everyone has said is a big need here. As you get to scratch cooking, cold storage becomes more and more important. It is the same for every other business that exists. And so if you can have that facility or that space that does that same work, it's a multiple of return on the investment. So again, talking about how these things are intertwined and how you can support them all through the same work is really important. It increases the bang for your buck.
Wow, that's yes, yes. Can you join everyone at their school board meetings across the country, Tarek? That would be really helpful. That's incredible. I think feedback and guidance on that. And I also noticed a question from Pamela in the chat about how do we get advocates on school boards to be proponents of fresh food in schools. I've talked to, I think MJ, our Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy, is in this chat too. I've talked to him about that a number of times. And how do we kind of start to set up some of that advocacy with school board members? Wow, we have an amazing panel. So that has been incredible. We also are getting an incredible amount of questions. So, and we are not going to be able to answer all of them, but my team is pulling out some really good ones that I'm going to ask the panelists right now. Okay, let me get to it. Um, okay, so here is the first one. What are the circumstances where a central kitchen for a district or city would be most effective? If district opportunity for the model instead of investing in kitchen upgrades for each individual school, do you have tips to make this model as impactful as possible? And maybe we can even put that, load up that question in the chat too, team. I don't know. Anne or Tarek, it sounds like maybe one of you might be best for this.
Well, I'll start, and Tarek, you can jump in. What I would say is before we built the Culinary Center in Boulder, we spent years and years and years doing the ROI, just like Tarek said, to figure out at what point the Culinary Center would make money, or would break even for the investment, which was made with bond funds. And it was an 8-year turnaround, which is kind of unbelievable that when we put the money into the Culinary Center, which is now producing 17,000 meals a day, we were able to reduce the payroll and the meals per labor hour out at the 52 sites, take that labor and reduce it further, put it into the Culinary Center, which overall brought our payroll costs down. And then in the savings on food costs, because we could buy in bulk, we could buy, in fact, in some cases, we could order the food for a whole year because we're on a 6-week cycle that runs for a whole year. So the waste was less, the cost of the food was less, the cost of payroll was less. So the ROI on investment was a no-brainer.
Yeah,
That's
I'll just
great.
add, I dropped in the chat. We've been doing this work for a few years now, and I've been leading some of that. In DC, we call it a Central Food Processing Facility study. We've done 2 of them now. We're working on the ROI, what it looks like. I can't share numbers because it's all internal right now. But we're exploring what that looks like, and we have a mandate currently in DC to go to fully self-operated meals. And so this is going to be something very critical for us. Please check out the link I dropped in there. It's from our Food Policy Council. There's information, there's data, it tells you square footage and size. You can estimate all the things, but use it as a starting point. And then again, think of your schools as your anchor institution that's going to support that work. And what else can you add on and produce? Again, cooperative purchasing, forward contracting, how do you reduce some of those costs are all part of that. But it's a good starting point to look from.
That's great. Okay, let's go to a policy question. Thank you guys. Thanks, Ann and Tarek. That is super helpful. So here's a question from our chat. Curious for your read on harvest to hallways and plant-based meal items. How can we keep the momentum on legumes, etc., being offered as meal items given the deprioritization of plant proteins? What do you think? Liz, do you have anything to say on that?
I'm just trying to process that question. I think the challenge that we're finding all around from SNA is that we're continuing to be asked to do more and things differently without an investment from the federal government. So we, want our folks to have the resources that they need to meet the demands of their customers and their consumers. And so I think the bigger question is, how are we going to meet the moment when we have a proposed rule in front of us with additional unfunded mandates is whether it's protein, whether it's uh, uh, protein reducing added sugar, etc. what are we doing as a community to demand that if we're going to be asked to be doing more, how are we going to pay for it? So I think we could ask that question individually of all of the things based on what we saw in the DGAs and what we know is going to be introduced in the proposed rule.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so this is a question coming in. It's a little, adjacent to infrastructure, but Kat Soltamond is asking a question about gender equity. So gender equity needs to be addressed in school food service. Mostly women paid the least compared to other highly skilled and technical positions in districts. What can we do? And I don't know if you want to speak to this at all.
Sure. I've written about this extensively. Many of you have maybe heard me say that in Boulder, the school food people starting wage was $1 to $1.50 less than the custodians. And you're right, Kat, it is a gender-based issue. It goes all the way back to women's lib. I mean, we're talking about an issue that started long, long ago. But, school food workers were originally volunteers and then lower paid and then only working because they were working when their kids worked. And the people who managed them were all often women, and women make 76 cents to the dollar for men, even today in the United States. So we just have to advocate. And the way that I believe you do it, and what I worked very hard on in Boulder to do, was just show the amount of education and training the staff had. So when somebody said to me the custodians should make more because they're handling chemicals, I would give them the list of all the cleaning stuff that we used and all the training that you have to do and the USDA guidance on training, which most custodians don't have any of that. So just keep pushing. And lastly, the food service people are putting food in children's mouths. What could be more important than that? And what parent is going to say that safe, delicious food for their kids is less important than somebody mopping the floor?
Yeah, well, that is a great place to end our webinar, I will say. The equity in the workforce is a piece the Chef Ann Foundation is actively working on. And I know something that Ann is incredibly passionate about and has spent her career advocating for. So we have more questions. I just want to stay on this webinar and keep answering questions. There's a salad bar question I want to answer. There's all these other central kitchen questions, but I'm going to ask the team to try and include some of these in our resources. So some of the questions we think are important that we didn't get to, we'll include in our resources with answers. There are really many pieces to the school food puzzle, but one major piece is clear. If we want districts to serve more fresh food, they need real kitchens to do it. We at the Chef Ann Foundation, we really wonk out on this piece of the puzzle and how to support districts to create the most efficient and effective kitchen spaces. And that is, you might have been hearing from our operators in the chat too. But if you work in school districts and want our help, please explore some of our open applications, such as Get Schools Cooking. That one closes in September. Also, if you want to learn more about all of our online scratch cooking resources, and we have a lot about central kitchens and kitchen infrastructure, go to the lunchbox.org. It is free to use for everyone. This is critical work. I want to just say a huge thank you to everyone on the panel for their time. And today, I want to say thank you to all of our operators on this webinar and in the chat. I mean, this is a big tent issue. We have so many people coming together to work on this. And I think to Liz's point, now is our time. We have to come together to get this done. So thank you all so much. And you should be getting the recording and the resources soon from our team. Really appreciate your time.